In this conversation, Jon Madera shares the story of Buena Gente Golf, discussing the triumphs and challenges of entrepreneurship. He emphasizes the importance of community support and networking in building a successful business. The discussion also touches on the balance between finding a full-time job and pursuing one's passion, highlighting personal insights and experiences along the way. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to The Range, the podcast where we explore the intersection of passion and business in the world of golf. I'm your host, Ari Ratner, and each episode will dive into the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who are transforming the game we love into thriving businesses. Whether you're a golf enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about the business behind the sport, you're in the right place. So grab your clubs and join us on The Range as we tee off into the world of golf entrepreneurship. Welcome back to another episode of The Range. We're joined here by Jon Madera, founder of Buena Gente Golf. Excited to have Jon on. Jon and I have a lot in common, although I am inspired by how far he's come with Buena Gente, and I know it's a small step in a big journey or a long journey, and we'll get into that. But Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this chat, Ari.
Yeah.
I'm excited to dive deep in some of the things we've already discussed.
Yeah. So, appreciate the time we've spent kind of digging in on your story. Would love to give the audience a quick background into who you are, how you came about starting Buena Gente, and your connection to golf as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. Jon Madera, as you mentioned, I am of Puerto Rican descent, born in West Palm Beach, Florida. Was living in New York till I was about 14 years old. I have no recollection of Florida. So I was in New York, the Bronx till I was about 7, Long Island till I was about 14. And then from there, my dad said, I'm retiring. You guys are, whether you like it or not, we're going to Puerto Rico. We ended up in Puerto Rico. I finished high school there. And I always knew since I was a little kid, since Toy Story came out, I was like, I want to work in computer animation. That was the very first thing. I always drew. I always liked to be creative. And so after graduating high school in Puerto Rico, I was looking for courses or schools, anything that had computer animation. And since my sister was living in California at the time, that was the best curriculum I could find. It was at the Art Institute in San Francisco. I asked if I could live with her, and the rest is history, pretty much. I started in the Art Institute with life drawing and things like that, anatomy to get you started. But then we moved farther away from San Francisco, and I settled for a graphic design course at a different school. And so from that graphic design, I'm sure you're aware, graphic design could branch into so many different things, right? And I decided to go down the digital or the visual design route, and that turned into UI, UX design, prototyping, researcher, and then I had this title of product design. Most recently, I was the VP of product design for a data company. So from a professional standpoint, that's what I do. I lead, mentor teams, and build teams in the product design field.
So often entrepreneurs, and this has been my experience, but start off, their business as generic as a term, as a side hustle, right? And, they focus on kind of their career to help finance their side hustle. And talk to me a little bit about how you started Buena Gente, why you started it, and really maybe even take a step back and your connection to the sport in golf, and how that maybe was a thought in your head of building a company around the game.
Yeah. So when I was a little kid, my dad was a welder for the union in New York. And I think the story is my oldest brother and my father, they always say, no, I picked up golf first. But at the end of the day, they're both golf, like crazy for golf. And so my dad getting home with a driver and those little wiffle ball golf balls, for me, it was like, what are you doing? Like this doesn't fit your personality, you know what I'm saying? And I was alone a lot when I was a kid, so I just started swinging the driver in front of the house, with those wiffle balls that didn't go far. So I always had like good form. Like my everybody that sees me, I've always been a casual golfer.
Mm-hmm.
Once a year, once every other year, like I just didn't care about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I pick up the club, people would always tell me, you have, good form. You just need to fine tune some stuff, because they would see the outcome of the ball flight. They'd be like, you got to tweak some things, but you got good form. So I never really got into it until early 20s. Once I was married, I got married really young, and it's just wanted to do something different. And I had a group of friends that would go also every now and then, not avid golfers, but would be like, hey, let's go play around a couple of times a year. And that's when I started to pick it up a little more. I had an incident with my friends. As a casual golfer, well, I did what many casual golfers do. I left my club in the previous hole, and I went back to get it. And when I went to get it, some young guy, was going to tee off, but he looked like a legit golfer, head to toe with all the gear. And he handed me the club, and I said, thanks, bro. And he looked at me, he said, bro, and that for me was like, hey man, there's a clear divide between you and me. We're
Mm-hmm.
not bros. And I didn't pick up a golf club for years after that. Like, I was very, very turned off. And I always, when I talk to my brother, I'd always be like, you guys are like this, or you guys, like, you golfers,
Yeah.
that type of stuff. And so to your point, I started this side hustle for t-shirts that
Mm-hmm.
had quotes and phrases that the old salsa singers that my dad would listen to, 70s and the 80s and stuff, that these phrases and quotes that they would come up with, they were always so clever and cool and funny, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do shirts that aligned with my interest. I'd listened to a lot of salsa then, and I was a designer, and I always felt like there's no cool shirts designed, like intentionally designed for what I like. And I thought, I'm a designer. I'm gonna start doing this. And over time, I started doing those, and I started noticing that people that didn't like salsa were buying my stuff, because quotes are just just general across Latin America.
Yeah.
And then the name of that side project was called Mayo Ketchup. Mayo Ketchup. Mayo Ketchup is a dipping sauce we use for a lot of fried foods. It's just explaining that to people over and over. I was like, I'm tired of this. So I
Yeah.
changed it to Buena Gente brand. So everything started Buena Gente brand. And from there, I had this little character that would do things. He had a straw hat. He was an old man missing a tooth, straw hat, little pop belly with a little guayabera with the traditional, some people call them Mexican wedding shirts, Cuban shirts, guayaberas. And the idea was he'd do things that weren't typical in the Latin, like for a Latin old person to do, right? So he would be watering plants, or he'd be hiking, or he'd be skateboarding with Air Jordans or something like that. Like just this juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And then one of the things was him golfing. I was already starting to get into golf a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was an idea I was kicking around for a while. And now I'm not an illustrator where I can draw characters like that. So I reached out to a few illustrators, and some well-known, and they just weren't doing something that, that I liked, the character swinging and everything. And that gave me time to really like think about it. And then I was like, wait a second, is there anything for Latinos out there in golf? And that kind of started that light research that I did.
Yeah.
I did some light research, and I discovered, I saw some brands, but I felt like they were too heavily focused on one particular country.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like for all Latinos, it wasn't something that represented the audience at large. And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'll take the same name of Buena Gente, call it Buena Gente Golf. And I did this graphic, and it was just an idea. And the first post was just this.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting people DMing me out of nowhere, like, yo, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? This looks so different from everything else. And that's how it started. Like, sorry for the long-winded
No,
answer.
that's great.
That's from when I started to now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful to give that context. I think, my goal in recording and producing this podcast is to give other entrepreneurs a sense of what it took to get to where entrepreneurs are in their stage of the business. So all that context is super helpful. A couple questions to hit in on that. So for those of us who aren't fluent in Spanish, what does Buena Gente mean?
Buena gente means good people.
Got it.
And so a lot of what I feel went into my upbringing goes into choosing that name. My parents were always, making sure that I was, or all of us, me and my siblings, that we had good morals, we were respectful and things like that. But beyond just me and my family, I think Latinos in general, we're known to be the good time of the party, or loud in a good way, and infectious, that energy, approachable, humble. Aside from that, I feel like a lot of things go in that name, that Southern hospitality that people, I would hear stories of people fixing a plate for a random person that went to their house. It was just your way of showing how hospitable you are. And that's how it was back in the day. And I just kind of wanted to continue that tradition.
It's interesting because that moment on the golf course where you went back to retrieve your club, and the way you put it was kind of the opposite of good people, right? Like, you was appreciative of the gentleman handing your club back, and he obviously took, maybe not offense, but was off put by the word bro.
Yeah.
I wanted to hit on not that moment per se, but the evolution of golf and how it's gone from this sport for old, stodgy white men and has become more inclusive. Still has a ways to go, but has become more inclusive. You see more diversity on the course. You see from the professional level down to the amateur level. You see more diversity in brands that are starting up. Yours is a great example. Talk to me a little bit about how important that is to give your culture a voice in the sport, or become part of that voice that others are trying to help build up as well.
Yeah, I get messages daily like, thank you for doing this. One of the ones that I really liked is finally somebody that looks like me, and that was like, I still get chills thinking about it, or when I say it or repeat it, I get chills, because it means a lot to me that somebody else appreciates it but sees it differently. It's like, wow, somebody that looks like us, somebody that can represent us, and not just me as a person, but the brand itself. And I mean, it feels great. I honestly didn't know. I saw an opportunity for the people, not for me, for the people. But I didn't know how much people would latch on to the idea. And, it just has that, some people call it, what is it? A problem solution fit that comes before the product market fit. So I was just trying to figure out, are there people out there that jive with this? And like 5 months after I started, I went to the PGA Show, and I had no business being there. I just had a little booth, paid a ton of money for that little booth, and I had a few samples, and people were just coming by my booth saying, even afterwards, once it was like happy hour, everything closed down, and some booths were serving some alcohol or just like entertainment. I was walking to the car and people were like, bro, people are talking about you. Like, everybody's talking about this brand. And it feels good that people outside of who I was originally trying to serve as an audience are latching onto the idea, and they love it. This is one of the things that my oldest brother, he passed away in May, but he told me, hey man, I know that you're starting it for Latinos, but there's good people all over the world. So just make it more of a global thing where it's for everybody. It's Latin owned, right? And the original idea, you can have the culture be part of it, and you could showcase the culture. But the message is, again, back to your original question, is like, how do we shine a light on good people on the golf course? Like, it's been known for serving a certain type of audience, but there are really good people out there that like to play golf too. So
that's
it's
awesome.
a good mixture of a lot of things.
Yeah. Before I do want to jump in and get a bit more detail around the PGA show and your decision to be there and just the experience. But I do have a question about the character that you first created. Was he inspired by anyone in your life? Was it a combination of a few different older men in your family or lives that you run into, or anything around that?
I don't know, but that's a great question. I don't know why I feel like I always have a good conversation with older folks, even when I was much younger. And I always, we attended these church meetings or religious meetings since I was a little kid a few times a week. And I always had really good relationships with folks way older than me. Like, it's just like, and we joke around and laugh and stuff like that. And for me, I would always describe the little old man as don't judge a book by its cover.
Mm-hmm.
Because although he might be missing a tooth, he's got a straw hat, he's from the country, like inland.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good guy. He's a good person, right? And that is the way that I would describe the Jibaro or the countryman is, really humble, maybe not in touch with a lot of things that are going on now, maybe technology wise or things that are or hot topics or on trend, but he's just a genuinely good person. And that was the inspiration behind the little character.
Awesome. Probably someone that you could always just have a conversation with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Super
Always
cool.
saying hi in the street, or you just gravitate towards those people.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, for those of you who have not checked out Buena Gente Golf, please do. The designs are on point.
Thank you.
It's a lot of fun, and it brings a level of style that you don't see in the sport, which is nice as we think about evolving the game, as a community. Going back to the conversation around the PGA Show, as you mentioned, right, a pretty expensive endeavor to do, especially as a startup. Talk a little bit about your decision, and then walk the audience through your experience there.
Sure. I had taken a leadership course. And one of the things, there were a few topics in that course that really stuck to me. But one of the expressions that they would say is do things that make your palms sweaty. And so for me, once I got into watching some of these videos, like East Side had this Hulu special, right? And they talk about how they went to the PGA show. And I was like, you know what? I should do that. And I went to the site, put in my information, and the lady that's in charge of selling the spaces reached out to me, and she happened to be half Colombian, half Puerto Rican. She's like, we'd love to help you out some way or another and bring more awareness to diversity-owned companies and brands. And I was like, perfect. And she helped me through that whole process. But I was literally crapping my pants the whole way through and just doubting myself. And that's essentially the point of doing things to make your palms sweaty. I, as I mentioned, had no business being there. I didn't have any product. I just had like a couple of shirts and sweaters that I had originally came out with. Just to get the brand out. But outside of that, nothing. And I had this big backdrop that said, Latino owned, diversity focused. I wanted something that was punchy, concise, straight to the point, and something that would attract people's attention. Now, I was put way back in the cuts. Like I was by the food section, and I was hidden by other booths, and people were just finding me, man. And one of the editors for Golf Digest was sending people my way. So Cobra Puma was coming to my booth and saying, people are talking about you. People are sending us over here. Sunday Golf, I met the CEO for Sunday Golf, and we've had a couple of conversations together. Great guy. I met a lot of people like that. The CEO of Vice passed by, and I didn't know that he's of Spanish descent, and he lived in Germany. And we did a cool project in July. He invited me to model for, you go to vice.com and I'm there, and it's crazy all the connections I've been able to make. But more than that, what it did for the brand. I mean, 3 days later, I was in Golf Digest, like a small paragraph, but it was a huge deal for me. It was brands to watch out for. It was insane. It was such a magical experience. And when I think back on it, I'm just like still riding high of something that happened 2 PGA shows ago.
Yeah, I mean, it validates you and what you're trying to do in a lot of ways, right? And talk a little bit about how that validation kind of carries you through to today. In launching a brand is a feat in and of itself, right? And then maintaining that brand and also as continuing as a side hustle is also a challenge. Talk a little bit about the importance of getting validation, whether it's at something like a PGA show, whether it's being featured in a publication, or even some early sales. Talk about how that validation fuels you.
Yeah, 100% that validation. I think in a way it's hurt me in the past as a kid. Like we do things to get validation when we should do things that we want to do just because it's our passion, or it's a project we want to explore. And that's essentially what happened with this. I didn't know enough about golf before doing this. Matter of fact, a lot of people say, oh, that's like Eastside for Latinos. I didn't know Eastside before when I did this. It was once I started getting a little more into it and exploring different brands, I was like, oh, cool. That's, they have something similar. And once I started understanding, oh, wow, they're spearheading this whole, diversity owned, or, different audiences, highlighting them. I was like, that's really cool. But along the way, getting that validation from people, it's like every day, it feels great. Like I told you before, the DMs I get are just like, this is awesome. And there's times that people tell me things that it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, you're going to be big. Like right the last day of the PGA show, this Asian dude took my polo, put it on. He's like, let's take a picture. I want to take a picture with you before you blow up. And like things like that. I was like, dude, that's so cool. That you see me in that light. Cause sometimes we don't see ourselves like that. We don't see ourselves the way other people see us. So to hear it from them gives us that vote of confidence. And we're like, wow, I went to a driving range last year and I had the shirt on, and this girl from a different course was visiting her friend there. And she's like, oh my God, that's such a cool shirt. And when I was explaining to her, it's my birthday, she's like, super loud, you're going to be a millionaire like that. And I was so embarrassed. But, when I left, I was like, that's cool that people see this as like something like, I'm sitting on gold here, not just because of the audience, but the storytelling, the way I've done the branding and everything. It's really cool because sometimes you need to hear it from outside, the outside, because we're our biggest critics,
For sure. For sure. Give the audience a sense of the business as a whole. You talked about launching with that design on the hat. Talk a little bit about just the product assortment from the beginning to where it is versus where it intends to be in the future.
I'm still learning about how to deal with manufacturers, time that goes into it, all of that. But in the beginning, I went to college with a friend of mine that went, how I told you I went down the digital design route. He went into fashion and apparel, and he's worked for Fox Racing, Under Armour, Adidas, Nike. And he's done some really awesome projects. So when I started out, I'm very impatient. I'm like, let's get this out now. He's like, all right. So he started laying things out for me. He's like, this is a 9 to 10 month project. I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
We're going for it. We're going for it now. We're going to do this now. And I took a lot of shortcuts, and, like they say, you take shortcuts, you get cut short. There's a lot of things that I wish I would have done better. But at the same time, I think it was right. There's that Facebook's method of fail fast. I got out there and I just wanted to see, hey, is there a market for this? And I quickly found out that there is. Now you start to notice, all right, lower quantities, you could see the quality that matches that. Higher quantities, they deal with bigger brands. Now we're moving into a different level of quality. Another thing I've learned is it's never the time that they give you. So they say, oh, it's going to be 4 weeks. I used to plan things like that. And I used to, because of that excitement, I'd be like, in 4 weeks or next week, after 3 weeks, next week, I'm launching this. And it's like a whole month afterwards. And they're just chilling, dude. Like they already got paid, and I don't know what's going on over there. But now I'm learning that it's never the time that they tell you. And it's a whole lot more work than just designing something and submitting a design. It's so much more work. So I'm moving into that space where, as I try to go out there and get investors, I need to have a proper designer, somebody that can oversee manufacturing, designs, fabrics, all of that stuff, operations guy, somebody for each department that'll help us get some really good quality stuff out there for the people.
You mentioned your friend from school and how they helped you from a production standpoint. Talk a little bit about the community you've had to help build Buena Gente and obviously future state, you're able to hire a team, but talk a little bit about the community you've been able to lean on.
Outside of him, it's been a lot of learning things on my own, but there hasn't been a shortage of people wanting to help. So for instance, Back Nine Bullies, have you ever heard of Back Nine Bullies?
Oh yeah.
This hat, they went through a lot to get the right mold for their hats. And John, I met him at 2024's PGA Show. He gave me a hat. I was like, I love this hat. And he was like, yeah, man, if you want the manufacturer. And he was that generous to give me the manufacturer. And there's been other people that say, yeah, I know this manufacturer, and they connect me. Matchstick Golf, a good friend of mine, Dane from Portland, he's given me his manufacturer for golf towels, right? So it's like, all right, you guys did all this work, and now you're handing it over to me. It's such a huge help. And then there's other people that are like, I'm not going to give you my manufacturer without me asking for it. Like there's a popular brand, a very popular brand. I had a conversation with him, and me learning. This is like me learning, okay, different areas, different countries have access to different fabrics, have access to different sewing machines. Therefore, they could do different things, right? And I'm learning this, and then some are duty free, some you have to pay extra. And so I'm having a conversation with him, and I'm curious as to where regionally he's getting his stuff done. And I'm like, where do you get your products done or manufactured? He's like, I'm not going to tell you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I want to know like what area. Like, he was like, oh, Thailand. I was like, okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
So there are people that hold those things very close to them, and there are other people that are very, very giving and generous with helping other people out. One thing I will say, Ari, is that when people see you as somebody starting out, they're very, very happy to help you out. When they see that you're climbing, they're not as available.
Interesting.
They're just not as available. Yeah. And I've seen that quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's good to hear that there are those in the community that are willing to help. John and I continue to trade emails to try to schedule time to get Back Nine Bullies on the pod as well, as I own a couple of their products, and it's great.
Yeah, John's awesome.
I want to transition the conversation a little bit to the balance between working a full-time job or and trying to start a business. For those in the audience that don't know, I myself am currently out of work, and I am trying to find a full-time job while starting a golf business, while starting a golf podcast. So the balance of doing all of that is a lot, right? And, when you started Buena Gente, working full-time, building the business, and talk a little bit about the balance there and the challenges that you've had to overcome.
Well, the challenge is the balance. It's literally is that because I heard an expression a long time ago about having a second career. Like you hit an age where what you're really, truly passionate about, you start kind of diving into that. And some people even change careers completely, or they open up a small business or a shop or whatever, and it becomes their second career. And as I was doing this, it started out as a project, and I was so into producing more, doing more designs, interacting with people, that I started to lose that passion for working in that corporate space. I am a product designer, but I see myself as a creative designer, like a creative director. To do things just for a mobile application or just for a website, and then just this one piece of a phase in this customer journeys experience, I feel like it's limiting my potential and my gift as a creative person, as a storyteller. And since I have control of that in Buena Gente, and I'm seeing how I'm telling a story and I'm engaging people, I started to lose a little bit of that passion. Although creative, right? I started to lose a little bit of that passion in the corporate world, because it doesn't matter what kind of cool creative things you do. Somebody higher up will be like, no, that's not going to work. And they don't take the risk that us creative people do. And you're in marketing, right, Ari?
Yep.
right? And so it's like sometimes you want to do something, you're like, this messaging or this imagery is very impactful. And the higher ups will be like, no, that's too risky. And I feel like that's putting a roof or ceiling on creative people. And for me, in my experience, I just started to lose that passion to work in a corporate space, in a corporate field. And that's when um, I was laid off in January, and I saw it as a really good thing. I'm like, and people would tell me, dude, this is your shot. This is your chance. This is signs from the universe. Go all in on Buena Gente. And I've done so. And it's also gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to find something else to continue to fuel Buena Gente. But hopefully I answered your question. The balancing the two was difficult because I started to get really, really passionate and interested in my side project a lot more than my full-time gig.
Yeah.
And the balancing was tough. It was really tough for me.
And I think that's a natural kind of evolution of an entrepreneur that's working on something on the side. It'd be interesting to get your perspective around that shift, but also maybe trying to shift back a bit and think about it more of, you work a 9 to 5 to support the family, obviously do the best you can during that 9 to 5, but the passion that you need from a job is able to come from the project or side hustle you're doing on the side. Like, is that, do you see that as a possible way to kind of balance out the challenge of feeling passionate about everything you do?
Yeah, and there's still something good that came out of it. Of course, ever since I started to take on this leadership role about 7 years ago, people would always tell me, like, man, you should start your own agency. You should really start doing things on your own, or maybe have a few designers work for you. And so during this period of time, I was able to start Buena Gente Design. So it's buenagente.design. And I've been able to take on some projects and use Buena Gente Golf as a case study, where it's like, this is the creativity that this studio has under my guidance, under my direction, where, to be quite honest, if you don't like to take risks, then I'm not the agency for you, right? It's a bit out there, and I like to push limits, and evoke emotions, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad, but it's all data, it's all good insight, because now you're able to do something with that. But from all of this, I was able to start Buena Gente.design and work with a few folks, and other brands that are like, I like what you did here. I wanna see if I can, get your services as a creative, or as a content person, or, just as a designer.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about where the brand is today and where you want to take it in the future for Buena Gente Golf.
Yeah. The brand is, to be completely honest with you, it's gotten a lot of attention. I did a video that went viral, and I went from 4,000 followers to 14 point, I don't know what, in a month's time. It was like immediate, very, very quick. And that wiped me out of all of my product. And then I had a few more drops, which, let's say, for instance, this hat, zero marketing spend, like zero. Since I've started, I think I might have done like $60 one time when I first started on a post, but that was it. Everything's been organic, and it's been incredible. Like, I do videos that get a lot of views and a lot of interaction, but unfortunately, with all that attention, I've had to kind of slow down production, because, as you know, the market's not, although I do have this agency, not a lot of people are looking to hire a design agency to start things, right? And so, although it's my passion and I'm excited to work with people, I haven't had enough there to fund or to, like, sustain our living. So I've had to get the revenue, the profits that I've gotten from some of the merch that I've sold in Buena Gente, and pay for my day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
For me and my family. And to be completely real with you, with all the attention I have and engaged people, I I'm not in a position to produce more. So it's a
Yeah.
bit of a standstill. And right now I'm just creating content to keep
Yeah.
people engaged, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm sorry to hear that, but I do think it's just a small
Sure. Yeah.
blip in otherwise what will be very successful for you, because I think you've found a niche, and obviously, the designs are awesome.
Thank you.
And, you don't need my validation. You've heard it from others in the space, but
No, I do. I do.
talk a little bit about where you want Buena Gente to be once things start to pick up and you're able to reinvest into the business, and talk a bit about where you want it to go.
I always saw things and I always dream of things from an emotion standpoint. So I'll paint the scenario for you, and this is what I want, right? Imagine you walk into Dick's Sporting Goods and you see Travis Matthew, you see Ben Hogan or Bad Birdie, the brands you always see. And then you see Buena Gente. And even if even if you don't know how to pronounce it, you're like, well, this is different, you know? Imagine it's your background, like you can pronounce it. And then you see the patterns on there, and it's like tells a story and it moves you, and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Now, like all the other brands, we stand out so much from all the other brands. It's like, how could you ignore this brand? The name is something that in itself is positive.
Mm-hmm.
The hands, the grip it causes like a visceral reaction, like whoa, like you got to stop, look back at it, and then the actual design represents culture, tradition. I mean, imagine what you as a person walking in and seeing that for the first time, what it creates, what those feelings, like it's impactful. You'll leave and say, yo, I saw this brand over there, I've never seen it before. That's my goal. So if it's to be in pro shops and Dick's and whatever, that's great. I want it to be a name that, it's like a household name. Like people say, oh yeah, Travis Matthew, Bad Birdie, Buena Gente, that's where I want it to be. But my main goal is for people to have that reaction when they see my stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer that good things happen to good people, and I do think that the trajectory will get back on the right path for you, for Buena Gente, and I'm excited to see where things go. In past episodes, what I've done prior to kind of letting the guest off the hook is doing a rapid fire of a handful of questions golf related, just to give the audience a bit more background into you as a personality. But before I do that, would love to kind of hear any high level pieces of advice that you have for other entrepreneurs that are either looking to get into golf or in the golf space currently at a position not yet achieved, like Buena Gente.
Yeah, it's a very, very saturated space. Extremely. I see new brands every day. And I think people forget about what we just spoke about. Like, what emotions are you evoking? Like, people want to feel something, and people have the money to spend. They just want you got to enroll people. And sometimes it's through visuals, sometimes it's through your story, the copy, whatever it may be. But it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to start a golf brand and I'm going to do this and I'm going to sell a product. No, because you're competing against a bunch of other people. But what is it that you're accomplishing, and what's your purpose with that brand? For me, it was a specific audience. It's a story that I'm saying, also that I'm telling others that aren't Latinos, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people that aren't Latinos. That my story is, we're not all about sombreros, skulls, tequila, talking like that's not all of the Hispanic culture. There's a Colombian guy that reached out to me. He was like, dude, I'm so happy that there's finally a brand that I feel represents me. And I'm like, that's awesome. And then there's other people that say, bro, you're late. In the comments you have haters and like, you're late, dude. There's Lee Trevino's brand, Super Mex. And I'm like, yeah, but in the name it says Super Mex. I don't think a Colombian, Venezuelan, Argentinian guy feel like they can, that it's relatable to them. So my advice is, find something that is going to appeal to, even if it's a very niche and small audience. Find something that is going to appeal to them and engage them and hook them. For me, it's all about storytelling. It's all about, can you place somebody in a certain time and place? If you can do that through your storytelling, then you have a customer.
Yeah. That's awesome advice, and I think the audience will appreciate it. Let's jump into the questions. Anything that comes top of mind, no wrong answers. What's the one piece of golf gear that you can't live without on the course?
When you say gear, you're talking about, actually playing or golf gear?
Whatever. However you want to interpret the question.
Okay, well, my apparel.
There you go. Love it.
Yeah, I always got to represent.
Absolutely. And what's your proudest moment as a golf entrepreneur?
I would say just recently being invited to speak at PGA for Hispanic Heritage Month.
That's awesome.
I was invited as a speaker, and that was great for people they organically saw and found me and looked through my posts and invited me. And I was able to share my message. And afterwards, they were like, once everybody dropped off, the person mediating the whole conversation was like, you should start a podcast. This is really good. So I might be out there with you soon, Ari.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you got stories to tell. So
no, but yeah, that was a really proud moment to be invited and have that platform to share my story.
Absolutely. If you could collaborate with any other brand, which one would it be?
That's a great question. Mainly, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I don't look up to any other brand. I really don't. I get inspired by them, but enough to say, let's do a collaboration. I've had talks with people, like, let's say Back Nine Bullies. We had a conversation, and I even did a design, but it never went anywhere. But for me to actively go out there and say, hey, let's collaborate, nobody comes to mind, really.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's a fair answer. Last question. When you're on the course playing, what's your favorite snack and or beverage to keep you going through the round?
I like coffee, man. Yeah, even it's funny because here in Oregon, even in the wintertime, everybody drinks iced coffee.
Yeah.
So in the summertime, they'll say iced, and I'm like, no, I like my coffee hot. It doesn't matter how hot it is outside. So, I like a hot coffee, man, and it's very simple. I see the whole, drinking on course, getting blasted and having fun, and I will have maybe a small drink, but I don't know why I just can't enjoy myself out on the course and being blasted.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of the sport, right? Is everyone has their own
Everybody
kind
has
of
their
way of playing.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, John, I've really appreciated the conversation and obviously appreciate you spending time. Give the audience a chance to find you online and continue to kind of hear and follow along the Buena Gente story.
Yeah, Buena Gente Golf. That's the handle for TikTok, Instagram. BuenaGenteGolf.com is where you can see the products. Any new drops, you'll see them there. And then BuenaGente.design for any creative needs.
Awesome. Well, John, super appreciate the conversation and
can't
wait to get it out to the world.
Thank you, Ari. I appreciate this time, man.
All right, take care.